good? All right, thank you. You always have to test these things. And I am here physically speaking. There is no hologram of me or anything fake like that. I love listening to stories like James's stories. I always struggle with what do I do now, as a result of knowing that someday I won't have to come to do these presentations because I'm going to be teleported from my bedroom to do them without having to travel the 14 hours or whatever on the flight. I love the story of the Australian Defense Force. I think we're learning a different lesson in the US because we've gone away from cordons and we're now going to build really big walls. Matter of fact, I saw a story that said the biggest business opportunity in the world right now is IKEA giving us a build-it-yourself wall for the Mexican border. But they're really fascinating things to think about where we're going. What I'd like to do today is not tell you about what things might be like in 10 years or 15 years' time. It's really to kind of bring it back and say, what are we recommending at Veritas that our customers do over the next 12 months, at the outside really 24 months, as they start to think about how to prepare for a world where the only thing that really matters is the data that you have, the data that you have to control, govern, monetize at some level. I think of a story, when you think about the ability to use data and how much it matters for a business, there's a great story from NASA that dates back to the first crash that happened in 1986. And the day after the vehicle crashed, basically, or the day of, there were 4 suppliers. And the stock market reacted immediately to the crash. There were 3 suppliers whose stock price went down between 3 and 6%. And there was one that went down 12%. And fast forward, there was an investigation, of course, that the US government conducted on what the cause of the crash was. It took about 18 months. And in that time, there was a 12-month conclusion that found that there was an O-ring that, under the certain temperature conditions, was found to be made brittle when it got very cold. It was from that company that went down 12% hours after the crash happened. And it's an interesting story for me because when you think about market efficiency, you think about sharing of data and who could come to those conclusions within hours as opposed to 12 and 18 months later. These are companies that focus on understanding all the data that's available to them to understand who's performing well and who's not performing well. The name of that company was Martin Thiokol. They had a lot of problems, as it turned out. Investors knew about those problems, more so than NASA knew about those problems. And I raise this to you because when I think about what companies are valued on today, and some of the most successful companies in the world today, companies like Google or Facebook, and you think about how investors value those companies, there are really 2 ways that any investor values any company. I won't quiz you on them for those that are not financially minded. Discounted future cash flow, how much money do you make? And assets, what do you own? It's your balance sheet. Well, interestingly, what does Google own that matters? Well, no one really cares about their data centers or their office buildings. They don't care about their equipment. They care about one thing, and that is their data. They know a lot about you. They know where you went yesterday, what you bought, your habits when it comes to things that you're interested in knowing. They monetize that data through search and through other mechanisms. Facebook is the same. But when you go to their balance sheet, where do you find data? Where is it listed that they would say, I'm a valuable company worth billions and billions of dollars because I have this great data? There's nowhere. So investors are forced to sort of value Google on the legitimate earnings off their search, and then this concept that they can't qualify called data. And I think there's a problem there. And there's a lot of great work being done in the industry now around why is data not an element of your balance sheet? Because an asset is something that you own that has the prospect of returning future value. Data is that, categorically speaking. This will change. There's a prediction out there that within the next 10 to 15 years, all of your companies will be forced to report on data as an asset, which is a really interesting challenge because it means that you have to quantify it. How much data do I have? How much is it costing me to maintain if I don't delete it? If I keep it, what am I making from it? Is it a better productivity? Am I selling it to another entity? Can I do that safely? It would be a whole different treatment. Today, what do companies do? They store everything, they back it up, and they put it to tape. We know this. We believe that we're the largest houser of data globally for enterprise. Because the more you accumulate, the more you just put to backup, and then you store it to tape. This is an endless loop. I always think about my personal photographs of my kids in my family. Just keep aggregating them. I figure someday I'm going to retire if I'm really lucky, and then I'll look through them at that point and I'll have everything. But the world is changing. They're going to have to quantify this. So the one thing that you actually have that is your most critical asset is data. So then begs the question, how are we going to treat data? How do we get to the point where we stop looking at our infrastructure or applications and we start looking at the data, most importantly? Break it free from its silos. The trend that is very clear that's going on today is that you can give up infrastructure. The fact that James could stand here and talk about opening the 34th facility in South Korea for cloud computing, that Amazon has been doing this, and of course SoftLayer from IBM is doing this, and on and on, or Blumex now, and on and on and on, is an indication that most companies now believe that the commodity stuff that is called infrastructure no longer is that critical. Australia's been leading this, actually. The adoption in Amazon in Australia was one of the fastest pace adoption rates going back 10 years. I know, I was working with a company, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, many years ago as they were making this switch. You don't need it. In fact, what James didn't mention was when you go back to that first industrial revolution or the second one where you separated power from consumption, was that if you built a factory in the 1850s, you owned your own power plant. You produced your own energy. You had coal shipped in, you created electricity, you powered your plant. That's the way it worked. That's the way the English Industrial Revolution was built. But who would own a power plant today? Nobody. Because it's something that is better done in a shared facility. It's something that is more efficient if everyone pulled it off the grid. This is what's happening in cloud computing. And you as companies are already doing this. Now, will you do this tomorrow? Probably not. Will you do this completely? Insofar as that you'll only have a public cloud? Probably not. Probably will have some form of multiple providers, premise-based, public, but that trend is already there. You've already sort of, as companies said, we can give that up. Applications also happening. As much as people feel their applications, in reality they're giving them up to. They're giving them up to Salesforce, to Workday, to Office 365, to myriad other applications. People don't need applications. They're a proxy. They're a way to get data. You want to share data, you want to get data, that's what an application is. And if you can find someone that will do it better for you and get you the data that you need, you'll give it up. That trend is also well underway. Some of the most valuable companies in the world are SaaS companies with the fastest growth rates. So you've already demonstrated those two things you can give up. But this one over here, data, you can't. You can't because there's law that holds you accountable for your data. It's what your customers give you. It's what they trust you with. It's how you turn your business into a money-making operation. You use that data to make decisions. But today, most companies can't use their data effectively. It goes back to my NASA example. Why? Because they only look at their silos of data. The litmus test that I give to customers when I ask them what kind of data they have, and I would challenge you internally to your organizations, a very simple test. What kind of data do you have? And most companies will tell you what applications they have or what storage systems they have. I have CRM data. I have ERP data. But the problem with that is those aren't data types. In fact, CRM data, what I think they mean is I have data about my customers, which is fantastic. You have data of their names and where they live and maybe some of the buying habits they've had. But what about your operations center? Do they have customer data? Do they have chats? Do they have phone calls that they've recorded? Do they have information about your customers? Of course they do. Will they all be in your CRM system? Of course not. Most chat systems don't interact with CRM systems. And the problem with that, of course, is regulatory. In Europe, and I'll talk about this in a little while, is requiring that if you store data about a consumer or really a citizen of the EU, that you should be required to delete it upon request. And they don't mean just one type of data. If the consumer says, I have the right to be forgotten by your company, you have to go into all of the places that you store information about that citizen and delete it and prove it. But that's not the way you think about data today. You would think, I can go into my CRM system and I can delete that piece, but that wouldn't be sufficient. There's a big change in the offing we'll talk about. The change to go from infrastructure and applications to think just about data. And as James sort of mentioned about collaboration opportunities between companies like Veritas and Microsoft and Veritas and Amazon and others, the opportunity is infrastructure and apps don't matter that much anymore. But what matters a lot is what data do you have? Are you controlling it in a way that is responsible? Can you get at it when you need it? And are you using it in the best possible way for your business? And ultimately, when all those pieces come together and an investor comes knocking, can you answer the value you're getting from that data? We talk a little bit, again, not so much about where technology is going 15 years from now or whether you'll be able to have a virtual reality session. Our business is, what are we working with our customers on the decisions they're making today about investments in technology, in their data centers, and their public cloud adoption, in regulatory achievement, security, and all the areas where companies are being required to make change, but they have to be able to do that securely and effectively. So we talk about 3 phases, and hopefully what you'll hear from other sessions today and folks working at Veritas to help you with is, number 1, what we call 360-degree management. What that means is, Veritas for 30 years as a company that's provided storage. We were the original software-defined storage company, as well as backup. We're the largest backup provider in the world and have been for many years. But that's not sufficient anymore. Backup and recovery, where you had a server in your data center and you'd stream it to a media server and then put it onto tape, is not sufficient for all the reasons that I mentioned already. So how do we think about that from a more 360-degree perspective? How do we think about that where I have to migrate an entire workload to a public cloud and back? How do I think about using all of that data for my developers? If I want to build an application, should I have to go to a primary database, extract a table, put it somewhere on a storage device, and build an app? If you do, you've got all kinds of problems. You've got governance problems. You've got storage problems. And what about visibility into all that data that I backed up? What is it? Is it old? Is it new? Who's touching it? Is it valuable to me? Should I share it more widely? Should I delete it? Should I archive it? All kinds of decisions. So we're trying to help our enterprise customers move from the concept of, that's backup, to more of a 360-degree view on managing that data. Secondly, when we think about doing that intelligently, the problem once again goes back to the silos. It's a backup admin, or a storage admin, or an application developer. These people have very specific views on what's out there. I tell the story of, and this is a real story, of a car plant that exists in LA, and there would be 2 people were working on the line, and they would drill holes into the ceiling of a car in the wrong place, and they'd do it consistently wrong. And they'd come back, the people running the plant would train them, put the hole in the right place, put the hole in the right place. Never did it right. Dragged them all the way down to the end one day and said, look, every time you drill the hole in the wrong place, we have to take the roof off. We have to take the shoulder harness off for the seat belts. We have to patch up the hole. We have to drill 2 new holes for the sun visor. We have to put all these pieces back together. And the 2 people said, those 2 holes were for the sun visor? And that's the reality of the way that a lot of our customers work today inside their infrastructures. The backup admin has one point of view. How much data do we have? How old is it? Where are we storing it? Who's touched it? But they don't know the application it came from often. They don't know what the regulatory environment was. They just do their job. Storage admin does his or her job. They put it on the big SAN because that's the disk that they have available. They put it on the NAS. They just follow instructions. They take the remedy ticket, they assign it a directory to an application, and there goes the data. How do we do that more intelligently? How do we give that control to somebody who actually knows what the business wants, as opposed to sits in the middle as an intermediary? And then last but not least, how do we share all of that? So when we think about sharing that data, when we turn this into a platform where your company can then go extend that data use to somebody else, you can do it to share that with a supplier or a customer or a regulatory body. Number 1 concern of our banking customers, certainly in the US today, is audit response. That's all they do is get audit requests, audit response. And the problem isn't just the response, it's the speed of the response. Because the more requests they get, the longer they take to respond, the more the regulator feels that they don't know what they're doing, so they ask more questions, and it turns into this feedback loop of never-ending response. So how do we get to a place where we can not only protect our data, whether it's in the cloud or on the premise, whether it's backing it up or moving a workload, or getting better visibility and extending control to our customers, internal and external, ultimately sharing that data so we can get prepared for a day once we'll have to tell an investor or a third party what data we have, how much it costs to manage, and how to maintain it. But as I said before, our business isn't trying to predict 10 years down the line. It's what do you do now? And we know there are 3 decisions that our customers are typically making today, where their dollars are going. I'm adopting cloud. I'm trying to turn my data center into a software-driven environment. I don't want to be beholden to a hardware silo anymore. And then how do I manage that data as the law changes around me? So we're trying to put all of the things that we think you need to do to get on that path when we talk about return on data to one of these 3 areas where we think dollars are flowing. Now, you can always tell us after this session here, my dollars aren't going there, they're going somewhere else, because we'd love to hear that. But when I talk to customers, this is true globally. These are the 3 fastest growing spend areas for IT today. So our job is, and I think James nailed this, people are kind of linear. Whether we underestimate or overestimate what's going to happen 10 years from now, you get a budget for 12 months. You don't get it for 3 years. You get just 12 months. So you get to make a linear change next year in your business. That's reality. So our job is to help you leverage the thing you already bought with us to make it 12 months better, but make sure that when we make it 12 months better, it's on the path to 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years from now. So this is going to be a little bit prescriptive. These are the things that we think that you should be doing with Veritas as we put you on that road to understanding what data you have. So number 1, when we talk about unified data protection, number 1 is we think about visibility. We're going to show you a small demo here, I think, for the only company in the world today that we've seen, and we are the largest data holder in the world, to be able to show you on a map, without showing you a command line interface, without showing you a report in Excel, but a very simple GUI, that you could see all the data you have, where it's sitting, who owns it, what application it came from, how long it's been around for, when it was last touched. And more questions can be answered like this. We think it starts with visibility. This interface is now working today with our net backup catalog, and within the next 6 to 9 months, you will see another 20 data sources added into this product called Information Map. It gives you a lot of information in this interface, but the most important thing to consider and realize here is, wouldn't it be great if I could show up to work, look at a single interface, and not just know that this is the data that I have backed up, because you can make great decisions with that data, but it can also show me what data I might have in Office 365, what data I would have in S3, what data I have in Glacier, what data I have in Box. That I could get one place that as a general manager, as a vice president of infrastructure, as a chief marketing officer, that I could get an interface that I can understand, knowing what my technology background is, so that I, for once, can have a better understanding of my business, what data is available for me to make my business better. Interesting aside to this, when I talk to customers about Hadoop and things like Cassandra, the number 1 benefit of those platforms had nothing to do with big data, had nothing to do with the algorithms they put on top or machine learning or any of that fanciness. Because frankly, most of the companies that I talk to, and we are the Fortune 2000 in terms of our base, they don't have any people that can really do that very well. They're talking about data scientists that there aren't enough of in the world to really make use of, even if they had the business sense to take and use the data well. What they did say, though, is this. Hadoop was the first time that anyone in my business saw all the data put in one place. That was the number 1 benefit. And the only reason that Veritas finds this out is because we were being asked to back up huge Hadoop clusters, which we think is kind of a ridiculous value proposition. That's not what Hadoop was created for. But the reality is there's a hunger for your business users to understand what data is available to them. And they'll take it any way they can get it, whether that's being dumped into a Hadoop cluster or otherwise. Information Map is starting to solve that problem. So whether that data came out of NetBackup or in the next coming months, whether it's coming from one of your other applications, very simple interface. We'll do a short demo in a second. Now, secondly, you've always had to deal with the resiliency of your application. So a lot of you adopt different technologies. You have SRM if you're a VMware user. You use SRDF if you're a EMC user and you want to replicate between different arrays. You have all kinds of strategies to try to make sure that your data doesn't disappear on you in the event of some sort of either a disaster at a facility level or your systems go down or whatever. And usually it's a patchwork of stuff. You can't really report on it very well because it is a patchwork of stuff. And then comes cloud. Because for those applications that maybe didn't have that kind of strategy, or you're being told, I don't want to have a cold facility, I don't want to have another data center where we don't use the infrastructure, move that stuff to cloud. Well, that's not that easy to do, or even practical at all. So a whole second challenge came around, which is why, going back to the concept of 360 data management, it's not just about backing the data up. It's being able to restore it where you want to restore it in a really cost-effective way. We'll show you a short demo on the Resiliency platform. It does two things for you. One, just like InfoMap provides you with a single GUI that anybody can understand around the applications, your SLAs, your SLOs, how to recover them, all the steps to recover them, handles all of that workflow and gets rid of all of the underlying data mover technologies, consolidates to a single platform for every application in your business, whether that application is a client-server application from 20 years ago or a virtual application from yesterday. And it does something else. It can do that, manage those SLAs and SLOs, even to recover in places like Amazon. So if you didn't want to spend $1 on new infrastructure to make sure an application is resilient, and you simply just wanted to spin it up on Amazon under certain conditions, it will do that work for you. And the last thing it will do is migrate those applications in perpetuity. For your businesses where your company's decided that public cloud adoption is the future, but you don't have a way, aside from rewriting all those applications, to get them from place A to place B, VRP will lift and shift that application for you with its underpinning data. So here you have a tool that for once takes old technology and new technology, supports it in one platform that's easy to understand, that can move between your facilities or between your facility and cloud providers like Amazon, Azure forthcoming, IBM forthcoming. And then, last but not least, actually we're going to have James come up and talk, you will see, Mr. Hamilton. Last but not least, you will see a demo or a little discussion on how do you take all of that data and use it for your developers. We'll talk about Velocity as a copy data management tool. How do you give your developers access to real user data from your Oracle databases to build applications without having to go to an intervening storage admin or to a backup admin, be able to do that safely because they had roles-based access control, be able to do that cost efficiently so they don't copy these tables over and over and over again, and in a really governed way because you can go back to these images and you can delete them as your policy dictates. But before we get there, Mr. Hamilton, show us a little bit of a demo for.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everybody. For those who don't know me, Dave Hamilton, distinguished engineer at Veritas. If we just bring up the demo, here we go. So we're going to take you through this. If we just pause it there for a second, please. This is a new application portal. You'll see this is an application portal. So a new thing, we're bringing everything together so that you'll then see this over and over again, that we're logging in through the same mechanism, same portal all the time. For this particular scenario, I'm taking on the persona of Peyton. You'll see a couple of different scenarios from me today and a couple of different personas, but that's okay. I'm really Dave. But in this particular one, Peyton Smith, I'm the IT storage and backup manager for Acme Medical. We've just taken over a new large company, and who here has been part of an acquisition? Whether being bought, whether buying, quite a few. What's one of the biggest problems that happens in all of that? Trying to understand what the hell you've got. How much data have I got? Where is it? What can I do with it? So if we just continue on the video for a second, please. So I type in my password and I hit sign in. Okay, pause it there. What you can see here, slightly bigger view of the information map than Mike showed before. Very quickly, using something like information map, you can then see where all of your data is, whether it's stale, how much you've got, how much it's orphaned, and also how much it's costing you per year. We can put figures into information map to say my tier 1 storage is X number of dollars a year, my tier 2 is X, Y. We can work through that. The bigger the circle, the more data. I didn't know we had a data center down in Africa. We've picked that up very quickly because the company we acquired is also using net backup. Within 24 hours, we've got their information and we've presented it into information map. Incredibly powerful. Within 24 hours, not installing agents out on all the servers to scan and look and see what's going on, just using the net backup catalogs. So something that you're already doing, we can then mine that information and tell you what you need to know. So if we just continue on for another second, please. So we can go up here and you go, we've picked up two things. Unprotected data has been detected. So in the Cleveland data centre, where we're taking this, so if we just pause there, where we're taking this is to be able to say, where we're taking it is you can see how much data that you've got, and if it picks up that, hey, you've got some data here that's not protected, we're then automating the process to be able to put a policy into net backup and automatically then back that up. In this second scenario, you're overprotecting your data. We have a whole lot of data that hasn't been touched in 3, 4, 5 years. It expires in 15, but why am I keeping it all on my tier 1 storage? That's really expensive. And in this particular scenario, with the dollars that we've put in, it's nearly $1 million a year for all of our unstructured data. If I can move that to a lower tier of storage and do that automatically, think of how much we'd save. We've done the estimated storage cost. If we move that data to something like a lower tier of storage or off to cloud, of $250,000, $750,000 we've just saved. Mike and I could have a great time shopping with that sort of money. 2 daughters, that wouldn't go very long at all. I've got 2 boys and a daughter, but she's the more expensive one by far. So if we continue on for another second. So what we've done is we've said, let's go and resolve that and we'll move it to public cloud. Where we're taking the tool is to then be able to automate that move of data from your tier 1 to a tier 2 or 3 storage, or even out to public cloud. So wherever you need it to be, you can still access it and you still have visibility of it. For more information, please come and see us at the booth. We've got some deeper dives as well this afternoon in that.
So the thing that you'll hear from us is, these are things that we think you can do in the next 12 months. They will all save you money. These tools pay for themselves. They pay for themselves because you're storing data that costs you money. Average cost of storing a petabyte of data all in is between $2 and $3 million a year, American dollars. It's a lot. If you can identify 50, 100 to 200 terabytes of data that you're storing unnecessarily, this tool is free to you. From a VRP perspective, one of the main value propositions to adopting that is not just that you save the labor and you save the time and the complexity of doing the migration to cloud or doing the migration elsewhere, but it is also that you get to get rid of all the underpinning technology that you're already paying for, no longer renewed. So things like SRM or SRDF go away as part of this transition.
So now we're talking about VRP. This time, I've become Andrew. I'm an IT operations guy and I look after a particular application. So again, we're coming in through the same portal. So if we continue on for a second, put in my password again, different password than Peyton's because you can't have the same password, but that's all right. And we sign in and again, we bring up the information map. Information map is going to be underpinning a lot of what we do here. So you saw there was a machine over here in Phoenix. We clicked on that. Here is our Phoenix data center. We can see very quickly how many virtual machines we're protecting and how many are still unmanaged. Because we can then integrate in with the virtualization technologies that you already have. We can look into the applications as well and tell you how the applications are going and how many applications you've got out there that are unmanaged as well. So you can do it at the host level or at the application level. Whatever granularity of visibility you need, we can provide. And then we also have the terminology of virtual business services. This is something that is absolutely integral to what we're doing. We don't just orchestrate things piece at a time. We can put together into a managed workflow everything that you need for a particular application to run so that it stops in the right order, starts in the right order, moves around in a fully protected manner. So instead of going, I need to move my database, I need to move my middleware, I can now move my presentation tier, it's, I need to move my medical apps. Click. And they move from one to the other. So if we continue on for a second, please. So we're here, we're managing virtual business service. We're looking here at the patient record system. And we go into the virtual business service. We pause there. We can see that we have then the portal, so the front end, what the doctors, nurses, whoever sees, the actual record database, and then also the file store. So that might be containing things like their x-rays. And so then we can look at that in a full tier view and go, actually, that's in the wrong order. I need to swap these around and have the database up before the file store. And it's a simple drag and drop to then be able to move that and get that all right. So if we continue on, we can see it's in Phoenix. And here we're using Net Backup as the data management tool for the replication. So if we pause for a sec, if you had, for example, between two sites using SRDF, we can sit over the top of that. If you had your DR or your resiliency layer running out in AWS, we can use an IP-based data mover that we've released with version 2.1. In this particular scenario, we're using Net Backup. Your images are already sitting there. If you can wait for an hour or so for those images to be recovered, why pay for expensive replication when it's already there? And you can use what you've already got. So in this particular scenario, we're saying we're moving from Phoenix and we want to take it to Atlanta. If we continue on, we pick the resiliency group, or if we only wanted to move one piece of it, we could, and we click OK. And now we get to sit here for 45 minutes while it recovers the net backup images. Now, we've sped this up a little bit. You can see over here the timings of the different layers. If we can just pause it there for 2 secs, we can see here that it's actually 43 minutes or thereabouts to do the recovery. We sped that up a little bit just to make life a little easier. But you can see the various steps that we need to go through. So it's very, very simple to go through this workflow to stop everything down, unregister it, recover it, change your networking over and start it all up. Think about how long that would take with everyone on a conference call to say, you do your bit, I'm off for a coffee, hang on, we'll come back again. So very, very powerful to automate this whole process. If we restart that, please. The next thing that we can do is how can you prove it so that when you do have to call it, you know it's going to work. In this particular case, we're taking it to AWS. And what we can do is full non-disruptive recovery rehearsals or fire drills. Take that whole process and prove that it works when it needs to work. You can schedule that so that you can be then very comfortable and confident to take that to your businesses. So with that, I'll hand back to Mike.
Thanks, Dave. So the two things that we want you to notice when you're watching these demos. Number one is we don't care at Veritas whether the underlying technology is EMC or VMware or it's NetApp or it's Amazon or Azure. Our job is to allow you to pick whatever technologies you're looking to work with, and we'll, through software, make sure that you're able to make it work for your business. That's point one. Point number two is the language in there wasn't application driven. The application was medical records. It's not what application it came from or what storage device it's sitting on. It's trying to talk to you in the terms that your business is being managed under. So if the law applies to medical records, you'd be able to go back to VRP and understand what is the resiliency of my medical records. Am I compliant with the requirement to retain, for example, that data for 7 years? And where can I move it to make sure that it falls in maybe a more cost-effective way of doing that? So we're trying to get rid of this language of applications and get rid of this language of storage devices or what tier of storage there is. If you think back in the way technology is developed, when you bought hardware, for those of us that are old enough to remember this, you bought Sun hardware prior to Solaris, you had to go figure out a way to install applications on it. You had to know what drivers were on the hardware. There was a lot of handcrafting. We all had Unix administrators that found out ways to tune hardware and make it work. Then operating systems came around. And you could adopt lots of different types of hardware as long as you installed the same operating system across it. For example, Solaris was wildly popular. But when you wanted to build an application, you had to put Java on it, and you had to install Java libraries, and you had to tune that, you had to do connection, you had to do all kinds of complicated stuff. And along came application servers, WebLogic and WebSphere and ATG Dynamo for, again, those of you working in that space. No one did that work anymore. Cisco did the same thing with iOS for networking devices. One operating system. You didn't have to know each and every device. It is now time for data to be the same way. And the language you're seeing in InfoMap and in VRP and those GUIs is allowing you to think about data without having to know that it came from a net backup catalog or whether SRM was the one that was replicating it or whether it's sitting on Amazon or it's sitting on a VMAX. It gives you that view over the top that only a software-defined company like Veritas can do. All right. So I mentioned velocity earlier. This is the last piece of 360 data management. It is also an ROI-driven purchase. This is a tool that allows you to reach right into NetBackup, extract data tables, allow your developers self-service access to build applications. If there's one thing the developers hate, it's infrastructure people. This is where Amazon came from. Amazon came from the developer who didn't want to put in a ticket to get a server or to a VMware admin to get a virtual image created because it took too much time. They want to do this themselves. And Velocity helps you help them. It allows them to reach in, pull data, while you don't lose any of the visibility into what was taken. You want to make sure it's not replicated into 5 different storage devices. It gets a golden copy. Multiple users can use that golden copy. You can define the roles of the people that are allowed to see certain things. You can mask data about customers that you don't think those developers should see, all coming from the same data store. So you're getting better return on the data that you've stored with Veritas. By the way, you can also use Velocity as a protection target, which will then replicate back into the NetBackup catalog as well. So as you get into 360 data management, it allows so many new uses, so many different protection mechanisms, and so much more value from the data that you already have with Veritas today. Now, all of this is moving into the cloud. It's the reason we had Microsoft up here earlier, and if you follow, hopefully you follow some of Veritas's PR, you will have noticed a couple of announcements over the last 2 weeks. Amazon and Veritas did an announcement 2 weeks ago talking about the various products that we're already putting, both in terms of the Amazon Marketplace, but also that we're selling through Veritas directly. Why? Because our customers need the things that James mentioned earlier. You need to back up data in the cloud. It will go away. It doesn't solve that problem. There are snapshots. Snapshots can be deleted instantaneously by anybody that has access to your Amazon account. You need alternative protection mechanisms. You need to get the workloads there through tools like VRP. You want to have visibility into data that went into Glacier, just like you had visibility into data that was sitting on your premise. Amazon recognizes this and established a partnership with Veritas because that's what enterprises need to solve for. Microsoft is the same. In fact, we built such a strong partnership with Microsoft that we're moving our own EV.cloud, our own archiving systems that allows you to do everything from legal hold and archiving of unstructured data files, for example, in SharePoint or in your email, into the Azure cloud, which will be available globally. Veritas is making that pivot into cloud again because we are a software-defined company that doesn't have a history or a defense of a hardware platform that's already sold into your data center. In fact, we believe that you'll make more and more technology choices over the coming years. You'll have more and more public providers in the cloud. There'll be SaaS providers. It'll be some combination, certainly not one, of Amazon and Microsoft and IBM and various others. A lot of you regionally will have choices. If you're in Europe, you have DT in Japan, Fujitsu and various others. We want to help you make the choice that you want to make without losing any of the visibility or control. So as we think about some of the needs that we're solving for in the near term, we're thinking about how do we incorporate storage into your backup strategy. So let's pause there for a second, think about retention. You spend a lot of time managing tape. It's 2017. We're still putting stuff on tape. And you're shipping it over a truck to a cave somewhere or a data center, and you're storing it forever, and you have no idea where it is or if you'll ever be able to recover it or not. But you do it. You do it every day, and you've been doing it every day for 30 years. It's time to change that strategy. Scale-out disk is getting cheaper than tape. So how do you go from live data to data that you store in a scale-out way cheaply and be able to have the choice to move that to cloud or move it back to premise on disk without taking that tape step? We're changing the way that you do long-term retention. This is a change that we can make this year. The change that some of our leading banking customers, retailing customers, manufacturing customers, they're finally moving to do. Why? Because that data is valuable. They want to be able to access it when they want to access it, something that tape will never allow them to be able to do. We want to be able to protect data into and from the cloud. So whether I'm backing up something that was built natively in Amazon or Microsoft or something that's on the premise, I want it to be able to be visible to me in a single overarching tool, which is exactly what InfoMap does for our customers. I want to be able to make the cloud provider of my choice, and I want to be able to do all of that on a usage basis. which is another big shift for Veritas. Paying on consumption, whether it's subscription or volume-based models, is something that we're now releasing to our customers. So if your company is adopting cloud solely because you wanted the flexibility in payments, we're going to give that to you whether you're on-premise only or in cloud or both. If you're adopting it because some applications run better in a scale-out cloud-based architecture, we're giving you the ability to have enterprise governance over all of that in a consistent way, even if that's only 10% of your architecture. And we're giving you the ability to manage and move that between the two. Now, we want to reinforce that the key for Veritas is in scale, is in security, and is in performance. So we think about things like storage. If you go to EC2 today and you build an application, when you store that data, it's all stored in S3. I hate to get too low level here, but I will tell you this, that every time you make a call in and out of S3 in Amazon, they charge you for it. So you build an application, the more your application uses storage, and presumably it does because that's how the data goes back and forth, your bill goes up. So Veritas, and you will see in this announcement with Amazon, has a software-defined storage that can sit right on EC2, give better performance because it's predictable and it's more localized to the application, but also not require you to go back to S3 for every one of those calls. We'll move the data to S3 on your policy basis. So if you want to move data to S3 for storage, create the policy, Access will move the data. But if you want that data to be used real time, don't move it, save yourself money. You want to move that data to premise, or from premise to Amazon, Access allows you to do the same thing through S3. You want to move it to Glacier, it allows you to do that as well. So we're helping redefine hybrid architectures in a way that saves you money. This is another one of the value propositions where when you build in architectures on premise, whether you're getting rid of tape or you're building in cloud with companies like Amazon, you save money by adopting these technologies. These tools justify themselves. VRP, as I mentioned earlier, allows you to control all of those migrations back and forth, know what moved, how it got moved, when it will be moved in one single tool. Again, saves you money day one. And then ultimately speaking, even core products in our SDS space, whether they are InfoScale, which is one of the most tried and true file systems, clustered file systems in the world, or Access, we allow you to, again, move applications that have been in your environments for 20 years without rebuilding them. The key value proposition for Amazon, for this product working in collaboration with Veritas, was all of those OLTP applications, the database applications, Oracle, they run better on InfoScale in Amazon because Amazon doesn't commit you infrastructure in EC2. Amazon's infrastructure is inherently transient. InfoScale binds that infrastructure to your application, gives you predictable performance and no rewrites. So now you can make a choice that you haven't been able to make up until now, which is, can I move a legacy application without rebuilding it to be a virtual one? Tools like this, again, allow you to make the technology choice that you want to make with the provider choice that you want to make. And ultimately speaking, as you make the next version, whether that's OpenStack or what's coming in June is containers, we'll give you a hyper-converged architecture that's purely software-based. We'll allow you to make the choice of hardware that you want, but whether you're building a Docker-based infrastructure or whether you're building something with Canonical or Red Hat, you can build a compute, storage, and protection platform in one single software stack that guarantees, therefore, all of the policy that you were used to in your VMware environment or in your client-server environment, all on a next-generation cost savings, scale-out way. So, as we said, we think that there are the three tiers to this. We think the things you can do today are to adopt tools like InfoMap. We challenge you to challenge us around making that a very simple ROI-based tool. You can save money on archiving. You can save money in administration. You can save money in risk management. You can move workloads with VRP and get rid of underlying costly tools that you already have in your environment that don't actually meet the need. You can also use that to move to cloud, one single tool, opening up visibility to all the tiers of your company. We can make your developers more efficient by giving them access to data to build applications in a self-service way, which is not only cheaper, but just makes everybody's job more enjoyable. And as you move to a place where you're going to have return on data, the ability to policy control data between your premise and cloud providers through storage devices like Access, through tools like Infomap or VRP, this gives you the ability for the first time to look at data without having to look at applications or infrastructure. What's coming here is all of these tools are being built into an API structure. So you'll have a gateway where you'll be able to call into these applications and control them programmatically. And that means your other apps, your other providers, your other partners, your other suppliers are going to be able to work, see the data that you make available to them over a gateway interface. So, last topic here. I mentioned earlier GDPR. This is a European regulation. A lot of you in Australia could say that doesn't apply to me. But the reality is that GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. All that does is ask you as enterprises to do something that most laws already require you to do in different ways. It requires you to think about deleting data that you don't need to keep. It requires you to show, if you're keeping a consumer or a citizen's information, that you know how you're doing it, and that you can delete it if asked to do so. Simple stuff. GDPR is taking effect in May 2018 in Europe, but variants of that law are coming here, they're coming to the US, they're coming to South America, they're coming to different parts of Asia already. They may not look the exact same form, but you'll have to prepare to do that, which for us is a 4-stage value proposition. I've got to find out what I have. We've proven that 55% of the data that exists inside an average enterprise is what we call dark. What that means is it's unclassified. If you go to an enterprise and ask them to show you all of the data types that they have, 55% they will not be able to tell you what the data is. And that's typically that data that's sitting on tape or that they've aggregated in large data silos. They simply don't know. They are immediately going to fall afoul of the regulatory environment. So we think that visibility is key. Visibility and classification. Secondly, being able to archive that and manage policy happens in our tools like Enterprise Vault. And then last but not least, the ability to search through it and really understand the context. Is it really consumer information? What kind of information is there? We think that as GDPR is a great instigator for Europeans to get in compliance with a law that can carry a penalty up to 4% of gross revenue globally. So think if you're a company like Nestle, billions of dollars of penalty if they do not come into a compliance within 1 year. A lot of your companies that have European-based subsidiaries are all required to be compliant with this law. But even those of you that don't, the law asks for very basic things. Those things are going to come here soon. So again, we think the journey is a 3-stage journey. We invite you to take these very tactical, very specific, I think very ROI-driven steps with Veritas this year as you get to that concept of return on data, which we think is inevitably coming over the coming years. Discovery, classification, securing data in an open way is what's going to get us there together. Doing that in a technology-agnostic way, in a software-defined way, and valuing data over infrastructure and over applications is what we think is the litmus test for you as you make those decisions with any provider, Veritas or otherwise, over the next 12 months. I know it's a long day. I thank you for listening patiently, and I invite you to enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you very much.